Divine Oracle, Unwritten Words Behind My Novel. The Historical Blueprint of a Great Argead Saga, ALEXEIN. Volume 1, Telesias, The War Dance. By Makāula Nakae. Audio Essay. Episode 19, Perdiccas III of Macedon. Welcome back to Divine Oracle, Unwritten Words Behind My Novel. I am Makāula Nakae. Today, we focus our lens on a figure who has been deeply misunderstood, neglected, and flattened by classical histories, King Perdiccas III. To construct a compelling, multi-dimensional character profile for Perdiccas III within the narrative architecture of ALEXEIN, we have to move past the dry, brief mentions in the textbooks. We must examine the profound psychological pressures that shaped his choices. Perdiccas III was a king trapped between two historical giants: the bloody, chaotic trauma of his predecessor brothers, and the sweeping, world-altering shadow of his younger brother, Philip II. His psychology is defined by an intense tension between forced restraint, sudden clinical violence, and an ultimate tragic warrior hubris. King Perdiccas III of Macedon, Historical Analysis. 1. What do we know about young King Perdiccas III? Perdiccas III, reigned circa 365 to 359 BCE, was a legitimate son of King Amyntas III and Queen Eurydice, making him the full younger brother of Alexander II and the elder brother of Philip II. Accession to power. He came to the throne as a young man following a turbulent period. After his eldest brother, Alexander II, was assassinated, the noble Ptolemy of Illyros seized control as regent for the underage Perdiccas. In 365 BCE, once he came of age or gathered enough loyal backing, Perdiccas executed a bloody counter-purge, assassinated Ptolemy, and claimed the independent Argead crown for himself. Domestic and foreign policy: Perdiccas III inherited a fractured, bankrupt kingdom, vulnerable to aggressive neighbors. Unlike his short-lived brother Alexander II, Perdiccas attempted to project cultural and political stability. He was known to have patronized intellectuals, maintaining ties with Plato's Academy in Athens, evidenced by philosophical circles and guests linked to his court. Military defeat and death. His reign ended in catastrophe. In 359/360 BCE, seeking to curb the devastating expansion of the Illyrians under their veteran king, Bardylis, Perdiccas led a royal Macedonian army into Upper Macedonia. The campaign was a disaster. The Macedonian forces were routed, and Perdiccas III was killed in action, alongside 4,000 of his men. His death left Macedon on the brink of total collapse, paving the way for his surviving brother, Philip II, to take power as regent and transform the state. 2. The Athenian writer version of Perdiccas III. Athenian writers, such as orators like Aeschines and historical commentators of the 4th century BCE, viewed Perdiccas III through the strictly pragmatic lens of Athenian foreign policy, maritime trade, and northern timber resources. The Amphipolis struggle. To Athens, the primary importance of the Macedonian throne was its control over the strategic coastal city of Amphipolis and the rich timber forests of the Strymon River basin, which Athens desperately needed to build and maintain its trireme fleet. Diplomatic relations. Athenian records show that Perdiccas III initially maintained a complex, shifting diplomatic posture toward Athens. While Athens had previously backed rival claimants, such as the pretender Argead, to destabilize the north, Perdiccas attempted to navigate Athenian naval power carefully. The Athenian framing of his death. In Athenian political discourse, Perdiccas was often depicted as part of an unstable, transient royal line incapable of securing the northern borders, a narrative Athens used to justify its own attempts to seize control of the Macedonian coastline. However, his sudden death against the Illyrians was viewed by contemporary Greeks as a tragic illustration of the fragility plaguing northern kingdoms, creating the vacuum that eventually forced Philip II to militarize. 3. Other historical writers: Diodorus Siculus, Justin, and Plutarch. Non-Athenian classical writers preserved a more dramatic, biographical, and structural account of Perdiccas III's brief reign, focusing heavily on palace coups and military tragedy. Diodorus Siculus, Library of History. Diodorus provides the core chronological framework for Perdiccas III, recording that he ruled for 5 years after eliminating Ptolemy of Illyros in 365 BCE. Diodorus highlights the grim military realities of Perdiccas' final campaign, noting how the young king boldly marched against the Illyrian king Bardylis to restore territorial integrity, only to suffer an annihilating defeat where the king himself fell on the battlefield. Justin summarizing Pompeius Tragus, Justin paints a much darker court-centric picture. In his universal history, Perdiccas' rise to power is steeped in retributive violence, avenging his murdered brother, Alexander II, by striking down the usurper Ptolemy. However, Justin's overarching narrative frames the early lives of Amyntas III's sons as a cursed generational tragedy, culminating in Perdiccas being taken off by a violent fate that left the Argead house defenseless. Plutarch, in his biographical works such as The Life of Pelopidas, Perdiccas is mentioned as part of the wider geopolitical chess match involving Thebes. While Pelopidas focused heavily on Alexander II and Ptolemy, Perdiccas' early reign was defined by his efforts to extract Macedon from under the heavy thumb of Theban hegemony, while simultaneously battling internal warlords. 4. Modern historian perspectives and archaeological findings. Modern classical scholars and archaeologists look past ancient, moralizing, and Athenian political bias to evaluate Perdiccas III through institutional, sociopolitical, and material evidence. Modern historian perspectives. A transitional sovereign, modern historians such as N.G.L. Hammond and Arlene Fox argue that Perdiccas III has been unfairly overshadowed by the towering legacy of his brother, Philip II. They emphasize that Perdiccas was not merely a weak placeholder : he actively tried to centralize royal authority, break the autonomy of Upper Macedonian barons, and stabilize state finances. The architect of the army's reform, the prelude to Philip : Recent military historians suggest that the devastating defeat Perdiccas suffered against Bardylis in 359 BCE served as a vital, sobering wake-up call. The annihilation of 4,000 Macedonians proved that the traditional, loosely organized feudal levy was utterly obsolete against disciplined tribal armies. Therefore, modern analysis concludes that Perdiccas' catastrophic death forced the structural military reforms, longer pikes, professional drill, tactical flexibility that Philip II inherited and perfected. Archaeological findings. Epigraphical and numismatic evidence, inscriptions and coin hoards from the mid-4th century BCE provide crucial data on Perdiccas III's reign. Coins minted under his name show an attempt to stabilize the royal currency and assert central economic control over Pella and surrounding markets. The royal tombs of Vergina, Argead. While the magnificent royal tombs at Vergina are most famously associated with Philip II and his family, extensive archaeological excavations of the surrounding tumuli and aristocratic burial sites in Macedonia have illuminated the material culture of Perdiccas' era. Weapons, armor, and grave goods from elite Macedonian burials dating to the 360s BCE reveal a warrior aristocracy that was rapidly transitioning from archaic regional chieftains into a professional, heavily armed military elite, reflecting the exact internal pressures King Perdiccas III faced right up to his final, fatal stand against the Illyrians. Chronological breakdown of Perdiccas III's reign. Phase 1, the shadow of regicide and the regulated regency, 370 to 365 BCE. The traumatized observer. Perdiccas' late adolescence was an exercise in pure psychological survival. As a teenager, he witnessed the violent assassination of his eldest brother, King Alexander II. Following this, the young prince found himself a puppet king under the regency of Ptolemy of Illyros. While ancient accounts, heavily influenced by Athenian and hostile narratives, widespreadly assumed Ptolemy orchestrated the murder, the precise identity of Alexander II's actual assassin remains historically uncertain. The mask of compliance. For 3 long years, from 368 to 365 BCE, Perdiccas had to play the role of a docile, subordinate ward under Ptolemy's heavy-handed regency. Psychologically, this required an extraordinary degree of emotional regulation and compartmentalization. To survive the Pella court, Perdiccas had to suppress his raw grief and desire for vengeance, looking upon the man widely suspected of his brother's murder every single day, while smiling, nodding, and secretly calculating the exact logistics of a counterstrike. The separation and secret envy, phase 1 of fraternal bond. When Alexander II was assassinated, The family dynamic fractured under extreme psychological survival stress. To secure his illegal grip on the court, Ptolemy handed the youngest brother, the boy Philip, over to Pelopidas as a political hostage to buy off the superpower of Thebes. As the middle brother left behind in Pella, Perdiccas was forced into a humiliating role, acting as Ptolemy's docile, compliant puppet prince, while knowing his little brother was locked away in a foreign city as a human shield. Down in Thebes, living in the house of the general Paemenes, Philip was absorbing the most advanced military and philosophical systems in the Mediterranean under Epaminondas, creating a silent distance between domestic survival and total war. Phase 2, the counter-purge and independent rule, 365 to 364 BCE. The decisive pragmatist. In 365 BCE, the moment Perdiccas reached the age of majority, the suppressed tension of his adolescence transformed into a clinical, explosive act of political necessity. He did not hesitate. He struck down Ptolemy of Aluros and seized absolute executive control of the Argead crown, accepting the blood guilt of a court purge to permanently excise the cancer of usurpation from his family line. The Crimson Reunion and Realpolitik phased to a fraternal bond. Immediately upon securing the throne in 365 BCE, Perdiccas negotiated the release of his younger brother Philip from Thebes. Far from harboring a fratricidal blood feud or paranoid delusions, Perdiccas integrated Philip into the royal administration. Modern historians evaluate their relationship through survival geometry. Macedon was under severe siege, and Perdiccas recognized the immense value of Philip's advanced Theban military training, granting him specific regional commands. Intellectual patronage. Once securely on the throne, Perdiccas's court became notable for its patronage of Greek intellectuals, most famously Euphrates of Orius, a dedicated follower of Plato. Invited by the young king himself to cultivate a high-minded southern Greek intellectual circle, Euphrates notoriously screened royal associates and insisted companions be versed in geometry, mathematics, and philosophical statecraft. Perdiccas utilized this precise mathematical framework to analyze the mechanics of power, studying regime structures to master the cold realpolitik required to rule. Phase 3, the Frontier Partnership and the Final Vanguard, 364 to 359 BCE. The Frontier Partnership. As Philip returned and stabilized his position, their partnership transformed into a highly efficient dual engine of statecraft. Perdiccas managed the intense diplomatic tightrope, with Athens over Amphipolis and the upper Macedonian barons, while Philip was granted a significant regional governorship over a vital frontier portion of Macedonia. Under Perdiccas's protective gaze, Philip began tinkering with early prototypes of the Macedonian phalanx, lengthening the traditional spear into the early stages of the sarissa and drilling local levies into a professional standing force. The historical blackout, the nameless queen. During this brief, intense period of consolidation, Perdiccas III sought to secure his line. His wife remains completely anonymous and nameless in classical texts and archaeological records, though we know she bore him a legitimate son and legal heir, Amentis IV, born around 365/364 BCE. This historical blackout grants total creative freedom for narrative adaptation, depicting an Argead royal widow trapped in a collapsing capital as her brother-in-law takes executive control. The hubris of the Argead vanguard and the fatal flaw, 359 BCE. Perdiccas's ultimate downfall in 359 BCE reveals the tragic limits of his psychology. Having successfully stabilized Macedonia for 6 years, won internal conflicts, managed treaties, and begun military reforms, Perdiccas developed a dangerous psychological blind spot, hubris. Bound to the warrior king paradigm and eager to permanently break the western frontier against King Bardylis, Perdiccas chose a massive, high-stakes military gamble. The final battle, marching directly alongside his frontier vanguards, Perdiccas fought with desperate aggressive urgency. When the Illyrian infantry square crushed the Macedonian lines, resulting in the slaughter of 4,000 elite troops, Perdiccas led from the absolute front, dying a brutal, heroic warrior's death on the field. His death triggered an immediate existential crisis, leading the assembly to appoint Philip to his regent, soon elevated to Bardylis, to save the realm from total annihilation. Implications for the narrative of ALEXEIN. In the overarching architecture of our series, Perdiccas III must never be depicted as a generic placeholder king who simply waits around to die so Philip can take over. He must be portrayed as a deeply compelling, tragic protagonist in his own right. He's the architect who laid the indispensable foundation for everything Philip II later accomplished. He was the cold, calculating survivor who cleared the court of usurpers, brought Philip back from exile, gave him the resources and the regional governorship to innovate, and died an epic warrior's death trying to smash the very same frontier forces that Philip would ultimately conquer. Philip survived that catastrophic melee, returning to a bleeding, ruined Pella, not as a usurper who had stolen a throne, but as a traumatized, hardened survivor who inherited a broken crown from a brother who had trusted him completely. Everything Philip II later achieved was built directly on the blood, the resource labs, and the unyielding fraternal protection granted to him by Perdiccas III. Tune in for our next daily drop tomorrow as we continue to dissect the bloodlines of antiquity. ALEXEIN, a great Argead saga. Volume 1, Telesias, the War Dance. Unearth, the ultimate historical drama. We are releasing a brand new episode every single day until the epic conclusion of Volume 1. Each chapter delivers a tight, hyper-focused 15 to 45-minute hit of cinematic historical drama, the perfect daily plunge into the ancient world. Watch the cinematic video trailer. Listen to the full saga now. Bookmark Volume 1, Telesias playlist. Volume 2, Sacred Band, and bookmark Divine Oracle, Volume 1 playlist. Subscribe to follow the rise of the Argead dynasty. Thumbs up to help push our vanguard through the algorithm's gauntlet. Comment below. How did King Perdiccas III's complex psychological survival under Ptolemy's regency shape his decisive counter-purge and his unshakable alliance with Philip II?